Hey, welcome to the New Hope Leadership Transition Podcast. My name is Josh Hunt, and I'm the Community and Missions Pastor here at New Hope Church in Wylie, Texas. Our church is going through its biggest leadership transition in its 26-year history. Our founding pastor, Keith Spurgin, is stepping back and making space for the next generation of leaders to step forward. So we wanted to bring you guys along the process, show how we got to where we are, where we're going in the future, and all the circumstances surrounding that. We're hoping it'll help other church leaders, other organizational leaders, and our church to kind of know what's going on. We're going to have multiple episodes coming up, interviewing lots of people that have been along in that process. So we hope you guys will subscribe and follow along. Make sure to ask any questions down in the comments, and we hope this will help you. So let's jump into it. So guys, we're back.
Yeah.
Episode 2. How did y'all think episode 1 went?
Jake did great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was awesome.
Did you even watch it?
I heard a lot about it, so that's
We got a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, just looking at some of the numbers, like Facebook, of all places, has got like some of the most views on there. And so it's just cool. We put it out on a bunch of different platforms, and the response has been really good. We've been getting messages, the three of us, and
it's been
separately
cool.
It's been...
Probably a lot of my followers.
Yeah.
A lot of my social followers.
So
You are kind of an influencer online.
Pretty much everywhere.
So the last episode, we did jump into some of the history of New Hope, and Keith, you shared about founding New Hope, and Jake, you coming on staff, and just some of that past. And we talked about in January 2024 is kind of when you told the elder team, hey, we're really ready, and we feel healthy and ready to do this thing to transfer leadership, to transition. Can you tell us a little bit about that January 2024 elder retreat?
Yeah. So, as we talked about last time, I kind of did my initial, we're going to do this in 2020, and how that went. But then we went on sabbatical, lots of processing. Susan and I had major marriage upgrade. I had some deep work God did in me, on sabbatical personally and as a leader. So it just felt like came back so much more healthy and in such a better place. And then Jake went on a sabbatical, Lynn went on a sabbatical. So by the time we all got back, it's right up there to January 2024. And Susan and I had been praying and processing, and just felt like it was time. Felt like the Lord was saying, yeah, it's time to engage this process together, all of us as an elder team. And so we came to the team. We had a offsite in January of 2024 and had our oversight there with us, and just shared and said, hey, I feel like it's time for me to start moving toward transition. I don't know what that means. Don't know exactly what it looks like, but let's do this together, which was quite different from the first time when I shared it in 2020. So
the parking lot.
And it was, honestly, it was beautiful. I mean, there were lots of tears. It was super emotional. But yeah, it was really good. It was very different.
Yeah. Just reflecting back on that, it was neat too, because our oversight they're not local.
Right.
And so we actually talked about assigning a couple, which ended up being Alicia and Kevin Tubbs, to come in and be our kind of boots on the ground, to really kind of hold us accountable, to encourage us, and to really walk through this process on the ground with us, and in meetings that were leading up to us jumping into this transition. And Jake, at that time, kind of, how were you feeling that? Because I'm remembering a little bit of the...
Yeah, it was a weird, like, okay, this is really happening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of flashbacks of the prior 4 years of anticipating, dreaming, thinking, the transition always kind of feeling far off.
Yeah.
Like, oh, one day. But then you sharing that day. And I just remember, like, okay, here we go. Like, it's here. And excitement as well. And, all of the emotions that come with it. So
yeah. I just remember my wife Melanie getting up and going, well, we've only been here, we came on staff about a year before that, less than a year before that. And she's like, we just came on staff and now you're leaving. And, she had all these emotions that kind of.
And it can't be Josh.
And it can't be Josh. So who's it going to be? And it's funny to look back on that now for sure.
Yeah. Ironic.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, even though we knew it was coming. But when you and Susan said, here it is.
Yeah.
It's just a whole nother level of grief, of the reality of it, of processing about things that you never had to process until now. It was a really interesting thing because in the room it felt like nobody was surprised that that's what was happening, but we all it hit us all in a new area, new way. So
really did, including Susan and I.
Yeah.
It was like, whoa, we just said that out loud.
Yeah.
Was that the meeting though? Shortly thereafter, Susan was dancing and trying to get everybody in on a dance party because she was excited that the news was finally out.
I think that was
maybe a little
few
later.
weeks or months later.
Okay.
Well,
it's happened a couple times. So then we end up going into the year, kind of praying and processing. And I remember as we talked about, all right, we're going to be looking at who's next, and part of the vision that came from our oversight was to really kind of keep this: no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind can imagine the things that God has for us. And so that was like our one of the verses that we really leaned into going into this process. And it was neat the way that God had worked it out in the long run. That we were like, because I remember going into it, all right, Jake's got this thing, and but we also were trying. That was me internally, but externally we were all trying to be really open and not put any pressure on Jake and Christine. Did you feel that? I mean, did it from the team, or
I could tell people were trying to protect us. At the same time, so much had been out there and so much communication and just history, right? Just at that point, it would have been 15 or 16 years on staff. But it was just it was this weird tension.
Yeah.
Where, like, even after that weekend, that retreat, I remember going to lunch on the way home and trying to process the events and you sharing and could tell people around the table were like, what do we do? How do we talk about this? And even feeling that scripture even more so, I'm like, I really think it's going to be different than what we can imagine, not knowing that just a few months later it'd be really different than we all imagined. But so,
and I was same place as Josh. I was like, okay, I really want to believe that scripture that no eye has seen and no ear has heard, but I kind of know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to hold on to it, but the other part of me is like, I kind of know how this is going to go. Come on. But I didn't. I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we went into the spring, and spring's busy around here with GRG and Easter and all those things. So I feel like we were obviously meeting and talking about it with the elder team, and everybody's kind of personally praying and processing. But really, it wasn't until the summertime that it kind of ramped up, and we're like, all right, we really need to start focusing in on who's this going to be, because you guys are ready to get this process rolling and all of that. So July of 2024, you and Christine get some time away and go on a little retreat. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was again, I feel like everyone had open hands to it, but it was like, but y'all need to go pray, and we felt it too, like, hey, we have open hands, but really, I think because of prior communication, because of my role here, because of relationship.
And part of it, so Chris and Sarah Jane Turner were operating as our oversight at that point, and one of the things they said is we need to honor what has been.
Sure.
And what had been was you being groomed for the role.
Yeah.
And so, we need to start there.
Yeah.
And it was the right thing to do.
And I agree. And looking back, we did need to start there. And so, it was the end, in kind of late summer, and I think we were like, hey, we had like 2 weeks or something. So Christine and I, we went to a cabin in East Texas, and it's such a crazy weekend. But I remember just feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so real, and the weight of it, because I'm like, man, this is this is our life, and I love this church, and I love this community, and it was an honor, such an honor to be asked to go pray about this, and then at the same time, such a weight of like, okay, and this is the next 10 to 15 years of our lives after 16 or 17 years in, and so I was feeling this tension, and we're driving to East Texas, and and I tell everybody, the true great husband that I am, I look over at Christine and I said, look, we have 2 days, and I need you to hear from Jesus, and I need you to tell me, because I just could not get settled, like the excitement, and then at the same time the
pressure,
angst, the pressure, and so it did not really go over well with Christine, when I told her she needed to hear from God, and then come back and tell me.
It's about as well as the 2020.
Yeah,
You gave her a couple more hours.
Yeah, Keith taught me well, but so we get to where we're going, and we were just not on the same page, and she's like, "Hey, you need to go." Like, there was a lake at the property,
far away.
Yeah, you need to go hear from Jesus. So I go out, I'm fishing, and it was just a tension, like just this heavy, like you just realize you love something, and you've given so many years of your life, and then at the same time you feel like, wait, why is this not just an easy yes? And so I'm praying, and I'm on this little boat, in this lake in East Texas, and I'm praying and wrestling with God about, why is this not this easy yes? Like, what is it? And I felt like God over and over said, will you trust me? And I knew I was supposed to say yes. I'm like, yeah, I think I will, because I tell everybody you should always trust Jesus with your life. And then all the questions started just kind of going through, like, well, but what do you mean? Like, if I say no to this, like, will I have a job? Like, if I say no and they hire somebody else, the number 2 guy usually gets the axe.
Yeah.
And so really I'm saying no to my livelihood. I'm saying no to letting somebody else come. It was all these thoughts.
Yeah.
And I just felt like Jesus was saying over and over again, will you trust me with your life? And there were questions about my identity, because I had been, at that point, it had been about 25 years in ministry, whether it be in missions or here at New Hope, and which is weird. I started at 8 years old. And,
yeah, right.
Just kidding. No, but it was like, I'm like, it's been 25 years, and this has been so much of my life. And so I'm like, man, if I'm not a pastor or not in ministry, what does this even mean? And how do I do this? And I'm letting y'all. There was always like, man, I've been so blessed in my life. Like, you've really blessed me. And I'm like, is the blessing just because I've been a pastor, just because I've been in ministry? And now I'm saying no to that.
Yeah.
I'm like, who in their right mind would say no to someone saying, hey, here's a whole incredible organization that you can have, basically. And I feel like, once again, Jesus just said, will you trust me? And if this is not what I have for you, will you trust me with your life? And I'm like, yeah. And he says, okay, that's not what I have for you. And I was crying. I just remember this moment of like grief, of like, okay, all right, I'm trusting you. And it was a weird moment, Immediately on this boat,
it was a life-defining moment in some ways.
Yeah. And I think it was the moment of 5 years of dreaming or planning or processing or the what ifs kind of coming to a close.
Yeah.
In the way I knew it, you know. 5 years of people making comments like, oh, one day when you lead this, or, tell me how great I am when I speak, whatever the stuff is. And it was all of that kind of dying, it felt like. And I was like, okay, I'm trusting you. And in that moment, and it's one of the craziest stories I've ever experienced in my life. I felt like Jesus said, will you trust me? And
you say yes.
I said yes, and I'm like, and so that was settled. And he said, hey, Colby's going to buy you a chainsaw. And this is where it gets really redneck, and I'm sorry about that. So I've been wanting a chainsaw. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I've been wanting a chainsaw.
Because you have one tree
I
at your
have
property.
one tree in my yard, and I'm like, man, I have to be prepared. And so, Jesus said, Colby's going to buy you a chainsaw. Will you trust me?
It's really specific.
It was so specific. And because Colby, so I have a taxidermy studio, and Colby was a client of mine that I met one time. One time, we spent about an hour together a year before. He lives in Florida. I've seen the guy 1 hour my whole life. And he said, Colby's going to buy you a chainsaw. And I'm like, that's the strangest thing I've ever heard. Like, Jesus, if you're right, how awesome. If you're wrong, I'm going to look so crazy. So I'm like, I'm trusting you. And I get off the boat, and I go back and tell Christine, I said, hey, I don't feel like this is what we're supposed to do. I feel like God has something else for us. And she was like, okay, I trust you. And we cried and laughed and cried, and like it was like, all right. But it was almost like this weight, like, okay, there's this thing that I've been carrying, and
Christine's amazing.
oh man, she's great, way better than I am.
Yeah.
So so the rest of that story is we come home, and I remember we come home on a Saturday, Sunday morning. I just feel like Jesus is speaking over and over, like, will you trust me? And we have, we come to church on Sunday morning. And
you didn't mention that you didn't tell her about the chainsaw.
I didn't tell anybody about the chainsaw because I'm like, if I'm wrong, you just lose all credibility right there. Like, hey, God said He's going to give me a chainsaw, and so I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
I'm like, Jesus, and it was the weirdest thing, and. We get home, we come on Sunday morning, come to the church, and I remember just that Sunday morning, like, worship was incredible. The youth are worshiping, like, people getting, just connecting with Jesus, and I'm thinking, I'm crazy. Who would say no to this?
Yeah.
Like, who would say no? And I feel like I could take you to the place in the auditorium where I feel like Jesus once again said, will you trust me? And so I think on Monday, you and I had a conversation around it and kind of grieved some more. Mm-hmm. And I think you were a little bit caught off guard.
I was surprised for sure. Because as I said earlier, I kind of thought, I kind of know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
Wasn't going that way.
No. So. And that was a hard conversation. Because, I love you, and you've invested in me for so long. And but I just felt like Jesus was saying, trust me. And so
I will put one little thing in here to say that this is the sovereignty of God, but if we had not gone on sabbatical in 21 and God had not done the work in me that He did about letting go of so many things and letting down my agenda and control and all that stuff, that conversation probably would have gone way different.
Yeah.
And it was hard, and I was sad, but I didn't feel angsty or like I need to talk Jake into this. I need to convince him somehow to do this. I remember I said to you, God's got a plan. He's got another way. And
then we sat there looking at each other like, we don't know
what it is.
But it was a moment like, all right. I think for both of us, but for me, like, you think one thing, and especially when you do, I've done ministry for a long time. I know how things are supposed to work. I know I can look at something, I can walk into a room and like, oh yeah, kind of get a feel for it. Mm-hmm. And this was throwing all that out the window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we had that conversation. Wednesday night, we're going to share with the elders to kind of share with them the process. And I'm like, okay, Jesus, I'm trusting you. I come to work on Wednesday. I get home. We have about 1 hour in between having to leave. And Ty, my son, said, hey, there's a package for you outside. And I thought it was something from my studio. And so I open it up. It's this big box. I set it on my dining room table. And I open it up. It's a commercial chainsaw in this box. No note. It was a giant chainsaw. And I start weeping at the table. And I'm like, what in the world? I'm like, what? It was the craziest thing I've experienced. I mean, that I can remember. And Christine comes in and she's like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "It's a chainsaw." Hey, and she's like, "I know. Why are you crying about a chainsaw?" And so I tell her the story, and she's like, "Why a chainsaw? Like, why do you like why
Of all the
things you could God could use?" Mm-hmm. And I think and I feel like God said, because you know what, nobody cares about a chainsaw.
Yeah.
But I for some reason, in that moment, it was me. It was God was speaking to me.
Yes.
And He's like, I can use this thing, Mm-hmm. And so I felt like, and so I opened this box and I'm like, here it is. And so I looked at that. There was no note, and I looked at the address. It was from Florida. So I called this guy Colby. I'm like, "Hey, did you send me a chainsaw?" He's like, "Yeah, you like it?" I'm like, "Can I tell you a story?" And so I tell him the story. He's like, "Bro, that's hardcore." I'm like, "I know." So at that moment, though, I felt so empowered by Jesus and the Holy Spirit that I'm like, okay, I can do
anything.
He's in this.
I go to the elder team. I'm like, you know what? This is sad for me, but it's undeniable at this moment that this is what Jesus is saying. And so I'm sorry, but because this is what I think we're thinking, but I feel like there's something else that God has for us, and I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And so that's the chainsaw story.
Yeah. And, I love that story. I didn't even get a chainsaw out of it, but my faith grew immeasurably by that story.
Oh, yeah.
And every time I tell it, it sounds a little crazier to me, but I'm like, okay. I don't know what to...
No.
I don't know how you make it up.
Yeah.
No.
You'd be 90 years old one day telling that story. They'd be like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Go pull it out.
No,
Your grandkiddies will be like, no, Grandpa.
No, I'm telling you. Go watch that podcast. I'll tell you.
So, you shared the chainsaw story with everybody at the elder team. Going back a little bit before that, because we were trying not to put pressure on you, that we very much were asking, is there anybody among us? And kind of started at the elder level. Is there anybody among us that could fill this role, without saying we think it's going to be Jake or whatever, but trying to leave it open. And we all were sent away with the task of praying and processing, is it me? And that's, each one of us were sent away with that, and that's kind of the process that everybody went into. And Susan was joking, I prayed about it, and maybe it's me. No, but so we all were tasked with that, to come to that elder meeting, the one that you shared, and share what we were hearing, if it was supposed to be us, and so
or if we had a leaning towards who we think it might be.
Yeah. And so during that time, I was praying, and I remember every level of this, I would, process with Melanie and go spend time with Jesus, and I kept feeling like in my heart, I really, really wanted to be Jake, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome, but then I would, praying about it, getting really intense with Jesus, and I felt like He said, okay, but you need to prepare your heart. What if Jake says no? Yeah. What if he says, yes to other opportunities, but no to this thing? Yeah. And it was like, and it was like, okay, now you need to really process that. What do you think about for yourself? And so going into that and just praying about it, and I felt like Jesus was saying, hey, if Jake does come in and surprise you, which it wasn't a big surprise on the Wednesday night, because me and you had talked about it, I think on Tuesday, you had shared with me. And so knowing that, I'd gone and processed that and prayed about it, and I felt like Jesus was saying, hey, if he does say no, which is where you ended up at, I want you to put your name in the hat of just being open to what the elder team has, and just in submitting your name, and that's the way I heard it, was put your name in the hat. I'm like, okay, I'm just thinking, because I kind of felt like we would have, we would meet and there would be a bunch of names, maybe several people on the team that are, and so just to be like, all right, if Jake is saying no to this, that, I'll put my name in there. Well, we went around the group, and I was maybe second.
You were immediately after Jake, I think.
I think Bill might have been in the middle.
Maybe so.
I think it was Bill, and then I went. And so I just shared with, and it was kind of terrifying of, hey, I'm putting my name in there, and so I feel like Jesus, processed it with him, and he said, put your name in the hat. And so then we went around to the rest of the group, and, nobody else was saying, hey, I think it's me, or there was a couple other names that were kind of thrown out. but it wasn't from among us,
Yeah.
where we were supposed to kind of start there.
Yeah.
And so with that, then it's like, okay, all right, well, Josh is, we kind of get to the end of that night and didn't really
Chris
share.
and Sarah Jane kind of led us through this process.
Yeah. And, it wasn't like this big, like, vision casting of here's what I see or whatever. It was just like, I'm putting my name in the hat. And everybody's like, what does that mean?
What's that mean?
What's that
What's
mean?
that
I'm
even-
like, you could just draw it out of a hat? Like, are we going to do it that way? But through that, I felt like, we were then tasked with, all right, well, Josh, you need to go really process this. And because that wasn't like it's a yes, it's a yes from God that it's supposed to be you. But
And actually, you and Melanie needed to go pray.
yeah.
And really, what is he saying?
Yeah.
Because Jake said no.
Uh-huh.
So what is he saying to you? What does put your name in the hat mean?
Yeah. And so at that meeting, we're like, all right, well, we'll meet next week. We'll meet next Wednesday. If you could have an answer by then.
It's not a big decision or
Yeah.
anything.
And so once again, kind of feeling like, wait, what are we doing? And I was speaking that week. And so it was already, and that was a while back. So I'm still very early on in my preparation for speaking, which is, takes all week long. But getting into this, And so I'm like, I'm going to need a little bit more time. And so I was due for a personal retreat, and so during that week I scheduled some time to get away. Went up to Broken Bow. I preached on Sunday, both services, and then jumped in the Bronco and took off up to Oklahoma and spent some time with Jesus and really kind of disconnected and just gave some space there for him to speak. And it was just me and him, and it was a really cool time, but just super intentional about being in the Bible, having a lot of quiet time and all that. But in that, I'm like, all right, what do you have for me? And he just kept taking me back to some of my history here at New Hope, which we didn't talk about last episode. I thought maybe it'd be good just to catch everybody up on that. But, me and my family came about 16 years ago. We don't know the exact time. I think it was in the summer, probably of 09-ish. I think Garrett was probably just over a year old. It's just crazy because he's running around here 17 with a mustache now and whatever. And but so probably 16 years ago, summer of 09. But we came very disconnected, and but we were the target family for what New Hope was trying to reach, people that are far from God. And we had I didn't grow up in church. My wife Melanie did. She grew up Lutheran. We got married in her church, but still felt we were very disconnected. And when we moved to Wylie, we weren't going on a regular basis to her church. She wasn't going on a regular basis. And eventually we got to the point where we want to raise our kids in the church. We want them to know Jesus. And so had enough of a basis for that of we need to find somewhere. So we're like, all right, we're going to go check out all the churches in Wylie. I remember us having this conversation. We're going to go check out all the churches and just figure out. And I think for me, it was like, if we just kind of go check them all out, we'll just kind of bounce around and we don't have to lock in,
Yeah.
And so we came to New Hope. We should drive by to go into Chili's, and so that was the first one to go try. Even though there's several that were closer to the house, but for whatever reason, it was New Hope. It was the first one we walked in, and came in very protective of the kids. All right, they're going to stay with us and all that. But I just remember Keith came up and said hi to us and welcomed us and all that. Hey, that guy was nice. And then we did worship, and it was different than what we were used to. But Melanie. I see she really liked it. And then Keith gets up on stage. And I'm like, wait, he's the pastor? What is going on? Because you weren't wearing a robe like the Lutherans do or all that stuff. And just how genuinely welcoming you were just totally caught me off guard. And I'm like, what is this? And so anyway, we jump in here at New Hope. It, kind of on and off for a while. There about probably 13 years ago, we really jumped in. So there's a couple of years of just kind of every now and again.
And you were pretty, what's the word?
Anti-people.
Antisocial.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of anti-church a little bit, even though you were willing to come for your wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were jaded pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
And you really didn't know Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. I had zero relationship with Jesus. I knew about Jesus. I knew that, the idea of Jesus and God, but and I believed, but I wasn't. I had nobody had ever talked to me about having a relationship with him before, and so, we had some struggles with marriage and all that stuff, and me with pornography, and this thing came out with me and my wife of this issue with pornography, and so I had one of the craziest nights of my life. Had to go back to work then. I was working at the police department. I go sit in my car all night long. It was a Sunday night, really, really slow. And I'm like, I just had this vision of losing my wife and my kids, and really just the things that we had learned while coming to New Hope, and just kind of, just and not diving in, but just kind of coming in, just a little bit of glimpses that I got of Jesus. I'm like, that's the answer.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I have to give my life to Jesus. And so I did it in the car that night. And it felt like he really met me there. Like his presence, like I've never felt it before. Yeah. And so it's just a really cool, amazing night. I still know exactly where I was sitting, and it was a construction zone, so there's stuff all built up there now, but I know that spot. Awesome. That just Jesus met me, and it was really cool. And so I went back and told Melanie that, like, we need New Hope. We need Jesus, and we need New Hope. Like, that's where, and because I'd seen the goodness in her of what, what would happen when we would come. She'd be happy that week, and just, I don't know, it's just the things that we were learning about.
Yeah.
And so we started diving in and started serving. Was still kind of avoiding greeters and life groups and all that stuff, but we jumped in and just got more and more involved. And so kind of fast forward, we led life groups, we'd led the greeter team, started doing missions and all this stuff. So me and Melanie were baptized here in 2012. Our kids have been raised in this place. All of our friends are here now. We have friends everywhere else too, but like these are our friends, these are our people. And so we're very much like kids of this place.
Oh, man.
And so that was a big part of my taking this to Jesus. Was like, he reminded me of all that stuff. And it was like, only I could write this story. Yeah. You could be somebody that was on the back bench, hated people, was just jaded about the world, jaded about church, looking at pornography, all this other stuff, that you could be the person that could lead this thing. Only I could write that story. I'm like, what? And for all those reasons, I was trying to talk myself out of it and going, you're not the person for that. But Jesus is like, no, that's exactly who I want to do this. And so in a hot tub at this cabin in Broken Bow, I felt like Jesus met me again and said, it's supposed to be you. That, you said yes to me years ago. You said you'd do anything that you'd give your life to me, and this is what I have for you. So just go tell them yes. Go tell them it's yes. And they can decide. They can bring it to me. They can. And so that's what I did. I came back and shared that and said, I feel like it's a yes from me. And so
chainsaws and hot tubs.
Yeah. That's, leading up to that cabin story, though, I was like, processing with you guys. All right, I'm going to be leaving. I'm whatever. I feel like I got to hear from Jesus in this time. Kind of that same pressure I was putting on myself. And just like, man, Jesus, I really need you to show up. I need an answer. And I kept saying, I feel like Jesus needs to hit me over the head. And so the Friday before I left, I'm working on my sermon. I'm in our dining room. I got a little fan set up because it's warm outside. And I'm sitting there typing away. And all of a sudden this crash happens behind me. And I kind of waited for something to fall on me, and I turn around and it's this painting from Alicia Tubbs of Jesus that we had on this armoire behind us, and I think the fan and whatever, but this thing almost fell. It just barely got caught, so otherwise Jesus would have hit me upside the head. So that was kind of my chainsaw moment of Jesus just showing up, and and Melanie walked in minutes later, and I have this kind of crazy look on my face. And I'm like, Jesus almost hit me upside the head. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I've been telling Jake and Keith this for the last couple of days, but he just does. He shows up, and it's really cool that we both have something very tangible to show that Jesus is like, I'm in this, and he's just really good. He's really good to bless us with that kind of stuff, and he answers our prayers, and he shows us the way. And so, we came back to the elder team, processed all that with Melanie. She's like, let's do this thing, and her piece, the piece that she had was really cool. It was way different than whenever I came on staff here.
Compared to when you came on staff and she was
kind of freaking out.
What's going on?
And but very much at peace. And so it was a cool opportunity to just say yes and kind of lay it at the elder team's feet of, all right, now y'all have a decision to make, of how you want to move forward.
Well, I just want to say that I so appreciate the way you guys handled that, because you didn't come back and say, this is the answer.
Yeah, this is the word of the Lord.
This is the word of the Lord. This is what we need to do. You came back and said, we feel like that we got a yes, but we need to submit this to you guys. And It's not our decision to make alone. And that was massive, because so many people, when they feel like they hear from the Lord, they come back and they're like, well, this is what it's got to be, you know. And you just didn't do that at all. It showed a lot of maturity about a huge decision, and then you just putting it back in the people that you love and walk with and are in community with, putting it back in their hands to say, hey, help us discern this, you know. That's so unusual and so good.
And how you walked it out, because it was kind of a crazy thing. You know, you've been on staff for a year.
At that time, a year and a half.
You know, you don't have a background in ministry. Mm-mm. You know, hadn't spoken from the front very much. Like, and the whole time you're like, yeah, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know, or it sounds crazy, or well aware that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about that's been your posture the whole time. Like, hey, I really need Jesus to show up because I haven't done this before.
Yeah.
I don't really even know how to do this, but I feel like this is something that Jesus is calling you to. And I have to have a dependence that without him, this does not work. You know?
Absolutely.
Which is funny because the rest of the team, they agree with you.
Like,
this is
crazy.
All right, like
that's the look I got from everybody. Okay,
but like, all right, let's see what Jesus says, and let's pray, and so
I just want to. We're in a long conversation, so I'm just going to press this out a little bit, because that posture that you're describing, Jake, of I can't do this without Jesus. It's the exact same posture we need to have in every situation.
Sure.
Even when we do have all the education or all the experience or all the whatever, that's the posture that he's looking for.
Yeah.
Is, you know, I may have all that stuff in my backpack, but without him, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
It's just me doing my thing. And, you know, he's looking for people who are dependent on him and saying, man, I need you to come through or I'm going to fall flat on my face. That's just a totally different mindset, and it's what we all need, you know. I'm doing that right now. I'm stepping into a whole new space, and I'm like, God, if you don't come through, I don't know what this is, you know.
Yeah. And I think it's where Jesus is always looking for opportunities to show up. And often we get in the way of that sometimes.
Yeah.
With our own experience, our own wisdom, our own understanding of how, like, even the whole process, we're like, oh, we're pretty sure how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And how it's just easy, if you hang on to that, as opposed to saying, Jesus, I really need you, you can get in the way. And
But also, I agree with that, but also holding on to what we know.
Yeah.
You know, just like, you know, you could have held on to, I'm going to stay in the police force, you know. I know how to do this. And I got an even bigger pension coming if I wait and do this thing. And Jake, hey, I know how to do this, so I'll just, keep stepping out, so I'll just grab hold of it. And it would be so easy to do that, and it would be easy for me to do that right now there's so many people in my position who are leading things, and we talked about this last episode, and just hanging on for dear life.
Yeah. And
it's like, man, how are you ever going to experience that space again in your life where you just have to trust the Lord, you know? And that's the most beautiful space there is. It's challenging and it's scary and it's all the things, but that's where our passion for God just rises up.
Yeah.
I think that's why so many people's faith is just dead, because they're holding on to what they know rather than stepping into the new of what he's inviting them into.
It takes developing some new muscles.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, because for me, and probably for all of us, everyone around us is telling us something different. Like, for you, like, what, you're going to retire from what you're doing? That's ridiculous. You don't know what you're doing, you know?
Yeah, you could stay 10 more years and never have to work a day in your life, you know? And
right.
Or, or for me, it was like, Jake, you've been here. Like, somebody else is going to come in. And so really it takes these new muscles of saying, Jesus, I look around and it doesn't make sense anywhere else, but I'm trusting you. And I'm going to lean into it. And I need you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I'm not in charge of my life.
And I'm not in charge.
Yeah.
Yep, that's good. Yeah.
I mean, that's the place that he's inviting us into, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the elder team then heard what I shared, and then it's probably about a month-long process there of every 2 weeks?
2 months.
2 months. Yeah, 2-month process.
Because you wanted time to oh, yeah. I'm just kidding. No,
After he came back with the yes, it was a 2-month process for us as an elder team to deal with that and get to a place of unanimity where we're all agreeing.
That word.
Because, different ones heard sooner than others, and people were like, I'm not there yet. And we're just like, okay, this is too big of a decision for us not to be in this together. We have to all be in agreement.
Yeah.
We're not moving forward without all of us on the same page.
And it felt painfully slow.
It felt excruciatingly slow.
For those early adapters, like you're like, okay, I can hear from Jesus, let's go for it. And some others were like, hey, we need more time. And you're like, it's like dragging. But
and for you guys.
but at the same time, we did, because we went into it that posture, that very open-handed, that we're saying yes to this thing, but it's like going into it. And I think part of that, because of that, we're going into it when we're not like posturing for it, and we're not coming in and trying to like, all right, well, here's what like campaigning for it.
Right.
That some people were like, okay, so what's this going to look like? And so there was a little bit of time of that to get to share a little bit about just some of the ideas, because immediately you say yes to this thing and start taking it to Jesus and going, all right, what could this look like? Got to share a little bit of some vision and some stuff like that. I felt like Jesus was sharing, and that helped a lot of people to kind of go, oh, okay, and just to even go back and recap some of our story and share some of that and share that I felt like Jesus is saying only I can write this story. And so it was something that I felt like everybody could then kind of get on, and so that was a cool process. So we go into that fall, kind of still processing all that, and then we're starting to try to figure out the timing. All right, so we decide, the elder team did decide that it was going to be me that would be the next lead pastor. And so then we start talking about timing and what does this look like, and all that moving forward.
Yeah, we also talked about the whole thing about founder transitions and how challenging they are. And Chris Turner, did his doctoral thesis on founder transitions, which was incredibly handy.
Absolutely.
Because he shared so much great information with us that was so crucial and so helpful. Like 90% of founder transitions go poorly, and we're like, oh, great, that's encouraging. But how do we get in the 10%? And, one of the reasons they go poorly is because the founder leads their own transition, which is what was happening in 2020.
Yeah.
I was leading my own transition, and everybody's like,
it was going poorly.
It was going poorly.
Yeah.
And, well, a lot of it is, it's not bad intentions. It's just, you don't have any objectivity.
Yeah.
You're the founder. This thing is, you've been with it from the start, and it means a lot to you. And so you don't have objectivity to be able to process all the emotions and all the things for yourself, much less everybody else. So that's one of the reasons they go poorly, because the founder leads the transition themselves. But the other reason is because the founder is a bit of a unicorn. Founders just are, because they grow up with the organization, and they learn things along the way, and they develop all these skills along the way, and they develop all these relationships and connections and all these things. And you bring one person in to replace that, and most of the time it leads to disappointment, because it's like that you don't have all that. And it's not because you're any less, it's just the experience and the process and all that. Or if you bring somebody in who is a founder type, they come in and they're starting something new.
Yep.
So you basically have to say, we're willing to just take this thing to the ground and rebuild from the ground up. And we just didn't feel like that's what we didn't feel like that's what Jesus was asking us to do. And so we started talking about Josh and a team.
Mm-hmm.
So it being, yes, you're the point, but alongside you we ended up talking about Jake and Natalie. And I think, yeah, it's just a really beautiful combination, honestly.
Yeah.
I really love it so much.
Yeah. Yeah, the next episode we'll bring Natalie in and kind of how we rolled her into our process and all of that. I was just thinking 2024 also part of you and Susan's prayer and thought was going into, so what does this look like on the backside of transition and what type of role, we had this diagram of all right, if they were still here but not as involved, there's all these different things, and we landed on this thing called the neighbor role, which was very much you guys still living here in Wylie, still being close and being a part of New Hope, but being off of staff, being off of the leadership team. Process that just a little bit of kind of how you guys landed on that.
Yeah, that actually backs us up to where we started the conversation to January of 24 because I was feeling strongly that it was time for transition, time to engage transition. And I was kind of trying to do the best of both worlds in my head, I'll transition out of the lead role, but maybe move into I'll still be on staff in some way because that'll help things, a little. I don't know. I was all the things, and we were on that offsite with the elder team, and I'm sharing this with Susan, and she's like, "Is that really what you want to do? Is that really what you?" I mean, she's like, "What do you really want to do?" And I'm like, I don't know. What do I want to do? You know what I mean? Because it was such a great question, but I don't allow myself to ask that question very often. And she's like, no, really, in this transition, what do you really want to do? And I said, well, really what I want to do is I want to transition out of staff and be able, if they want me to do oversight through our leadership network, GRG. And that's really what I want to do. That's what I hope for. And so that's what we ended up sharing with you guys. And so looks like that's what's going to end up happening. So
so this is episode 2. We're wrapping up, and thank you guys so much for sharing.
It's fun, man.
I feel like we all cried a little more than we intended to.
No doubt.
But it was really good. I looked over at Keith, and he actually had tears in his eyes at one point.
Great to see.
Which was beautiful. But yeah, I love getting to even look back and process this with you guys has been really cool. And
I think looking back, you just all the little details. You're like, I forgot. God, you showed up. That was crazy.
Yes.
That was, So good stuff, man.
Yeah, so good to go back and reflect on it and document it and and share with others because it's too good to hold it all to ourselves. And
I agree.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we'll catch you guys on the next episode, and have a great week. Bye.